Okay, this week I'm going to be adding an extra little worship book into our regular routine. We'll still be looking at the story of redemption. We'll still be looking at, of course, Love Does and some mission stories, but we're also going to be looking at some of those early Adventist pioneers. And I think it's really important for us to recognize that during this time period that we're studying, the 1860s, the Adventists had a huge part to play in so many of these reform movements. Also, I think it's really cool to make sure that we highlight that our heritage starts during this time. 1863 is when the Adventist Church is founded, which you've heard me say that before, but I'll keep saying it so you remember. And I think it's really cool that it comes out of kind of this revival of reform. We were focused on the abolitionism, we were focused on the temperance movement, we were focused on education and health reform. And so it's cool to make that identity connection for ourselves that we as a denomination were very much a part of some of these really cool things that were happening in the world around these people. Also, I think that it is good to remember how passionate these people were in all of these reform movements. They gave their all for reforming the world, in making it a better place while we're here, but also spreading the love of Jesus and telling people that Jesus was coming soon. He is coming soon. Now, he didn't come when the Millerites said that he was going to come, but he is coming soon. And for people that have already died, in a sense, he's coming even sooner. That's the next thing they're going to see when they wake up. So our lives are a blink. And I think it's really important to recognize, as we look at these stories, the passion and the prioritizing they did of their lives, that this was their greatest mission, their entire life. And I think for myself, especially just reading these and preparing them for you for the worships, I was kind of reminded that, man, I'm not always prioritizing things in my life the way these founders did. And I would really like to do that in a more profound way. So I was really blessed just in preparing this and getting the stories ready for you. And I hope you enjoy these stories, these short stories, and are really inspired by them. The first one the person we're going to be looking at is William Miller. Now, he is not an Adventist founder, but without William Miller, we wouldn't have the Adventist movement. So William Miller, of course, was the founder of the Millerite movement. Now, the Millerites are people that believe in William Miller's prediction that Jesus was coming very soon. And Ellen White and the Harmon family, she would have been Ellen Harmon at the time, they were believers of William Miller, along with many Seventh-day Adventists. And they believed that according to his prophecy, he had done a whole study of the Bible, a study of Revelation, and he believed that on October 22nd, 1844, Jesus will come. Now, we know, and we'll look at that study a little later this week, we know that something big did happen October 27, 1844. Those of you who have been in some Bible studies or remember back in from like 3rd or 4th grade when you studied Adventist heritage, you'll remember that the sanctuary whole story, this doctrine that we have, happened on that day, but they didn't recognize that. They had sold their crops. They had passed out pamphlets and preached. They had given everything they had away because Jesus was coming. October 22nd. Imagine if you believed that Jesus was coming this October 22nd, would you be living your life differently? I think that's really important for us to recognize. What would I do if I knew the exact date that he was returning? Now, we don't know the exact date, but we do know that our lives day to day could be taken away at any moment. So day to day could be our time. So I think this whole movement is actually very telling of how passionate we should be as Christians about telling the world that Jesus is coming. Anyways, of course, they sold everything. They didn't do their crops. They waited and they waited and they waited. And the day is known as the Great Disappointment because I can't even imagine that disappointment. But he did not come. And they had to go on with this sinful world in incredible disappointment, incredible mockery. They had told people, and then the people could laugh at them. It was very difficult. So we'll start with William Miller's story and find out what kind of man he was. Sometimes the Lord, to get his children to do something they should, has to start convicting them far in advance of his timetable for getting it done. For 13 years, the Holy Spirit had been urging William Miller to share his findings that Jesus was coming soon. So he didn't want to share them, right? It's only natural, it's only human for us to be like, what? This is crazy. Lord, why would you share this with me? I don't want to tell anybody. Still, Miller struggled back and forth, unwilling to commit himself to preaching the good news of his finding. But the Holy Spirit wouldn't let him off the hook. He's kind of good at that. As he went about his business, he continually heard the words ringing in his ears, "Go and tell the world of their danger." Can you imagine that? All the time, just kind of your conscience always telling you need to tell somebody. You know, "Oh, I don't want to." You know, that mental wrestling. Have you ever had that before with something? Maybe you're supposed to tell somebody something. Maybe you're not supposed to tell somebody something. Maybe you are told to, do something different than you're doing, and you're like, why am I thinking this? Finally, giving up in despair, so he's not happy about this, he told the Lord that he would go and preach if anyone asked him. So now he's doing a Gideon, right? Okay, fine, I give up. I'll do it if you have somebody come and ask me. Why would somebody come and ask me this? Nobody even knows about this. He felt perfectly safe in making this promise because he felt quite sure that no one would ask a 50-year-old farmer to preach on the second coming of the Lord. Ooh, always a little dangerous to make those promises and threats to God. But God's clock was ticking. The time had come, and God had a surprise for Farmer Miller. You see, it was within half an hour of his promise to the Lord that his nephew, Irving Gulliford, knocked at the door with the invitation for Miller to come to Dresden and to preach. Red-faced and panting from his wild ride on his father's fastest horse, the young man rapped smartly on the back door of the Miller home. William Miller flung open the door to his nephew, Irving Gulliford, his sister's son. "Why, Irv," exclaimed Miller in alarm. "Whatever are you doing here? So early in the morning, is something wrong? How are your parents?" "Why would Irving be here so early?" "Oh, no, Uncle," the boy eagerly replied. "Everything's just fine. But Father sent me with a message, and oh, Uncle William, he let me ride his new horse. Is it ever fast? He flew like the wind." "Irv," Miller said sternly, still a little apprehensive, "what's the message?" "Oh, sorry," Irving apologized. There's no preaching in our church tomorrow, and Father wants to know if you'll come and talk to our neighbors about the prophecies you've been studying. Will you come?" Nothing could have shocked Miller more. Without a word, he stormed out of the house and hurried up the little hill into the grove of maple trees that had become his refuge. He would not do it. He could not. But after a fierce battle with God, the farmer who went into the maple grove came out a preacher. Like Jacob of old, Miller wrestled and argued with the Lord. He'd promised that he would go if invited, but he hadn't expected to be invited. Now he tried to find a way out of his promises to the Lord. At last, reason prevailed, and even as a deist, he had been a man of his word, and God knew that. Whatever he said that he would do, he did. He finally submitted, promising God that if the Lord would sustain him, he would go. It was God, not Miller himself, who wanted him to preach. The following day at Dresden, he preached his first sermon on the second Advent. The meeting house was well filled, and the audience was attentive. At first, Miller was uncomfortable. He was nervous. But as soon as he began speaking, his unease vanished. The interest was so great that the people of Dresden asked him to stay through the following week and give lectures every day. With every passing day, more people came from neighboring towns to hear the good news that Jesus was coming soon. As revival began, it was said that in 13 families, all but 2 persons were converted. Arriving home the following week, Miller found a letter from a pastor in Pulteney, Vermont, asking him to come and lecture in his church on the same subject. That pastor hadn't heard of the Dresden experience, and from that time on, invitations poured in for the 50-year-old farmer to preach on the second coming of Jesus. The word was out that if a pastor wanted a great revival series, William Miller was the man who would draw big crowds and get you big results. So, something that he had not wanted to do, something that was really challenging for him, became something that God could use to further his mission. So, do you feel comfortable battling with God? Okay, so we see William Miller. I really think this is a special part of the story. He went into the maple grove, and the text said a place where he met with God. This place where he has communed with God before. Do you have that? Do you have a place in your house? Do you have a place outside? Do you have a place, maybe just a journal that you always have with you that allows you to kind of have this special place where it's like, I'm ready for a conversation with God. This is my spot. This is my place. This is my thing that we do together. I thought that was really cool. Do you feel comfortable battling with God like that? Why or why not? So I want you to really think about that. Am I comfortable questioning God? Am I comfortable arguing with him and debating with him and sharing my side of the story? And what other characters in the Bible have battled with God? Because certainly William Miller is not the only one. There are many, many Bible characters that wrestle with God, that disagree with God, that argue with God, that negotiate with God. He is a living being who wants to have a relationship with us. And I don't know about you, I've never seen a relationship ever in the history of relationships that was always on the same track, right? That always agreed on everything. No, that's not how relationships work. And if you think that your relationship with God has to be, yes, God, I'm always in agreement with you, that's probably not a very strong relationship. A very strong relationship allows you to have your own opinions and say, ooh, I disagree. But have an open mind, right? Mr. Birmingham and I are going to disagree sometimes. That doesn't mean that the first time we disagree, sign the divorce papers, okay? We don't do that to God either. I disagree with God. Nope, no more. We're done. No, it means we're open in our dialogue. We're open in our hearts. We want to listen to your side of the story. We want you to listen to my side. And eventually, the goal of a Christian would be, of course, to eventually side with God because, well, he is perfect. Unlike Mr. Birmingham, he, of course, is always right. And so, eventually he really softens our heart towards him. But he is so open to us battling and discussing things. Does it change, I think, when you think about this ability to discuss with God and argue with God and disagree with God and kind of wrestle with him? Does it change how you are willing to relate with God? Does it make him more personable to you? Does he make you somebody that you feel like you can talk to? I know it does for me. When I'm able to actually disagree with him, it's more like, oh, you mean he won't be mad if I disagree? He won't be mad if like William Miller like literally told him, I guess I'll do this. He was like he did it in despair. It was like, fine, right? Almost like when your parents are like, go clean your room. And you're like, I don't want to. And then you have this debate and then finally, fine, I'll go do it. That's what he did to God. And I think that when I see him that way, it's like, wow, okay, we can have this human normal relationship, but he's God. So if I just trust him, even after all my wrestling, it's going to turn out. It's going to go the way that it's supposed to go because he has made it a way like that. So I want you to think about things that you have maybe not wanted to share, or maybe questions that you haven't been wanting to ask because you feel like if I ask them, maybe God will think that I don't love him, or maybe God doesn't want me to ask those questions, so I'll keep them hidden somewhere safe. No, God says, bring that to me. Remember, let us reason together. Reason, meaning get it out there, argue with me, discuss it, and I will help you see what I'm trying to tell you. He definitely does, though. He definitely wants us to bring those to him, because if we don't bring them to him, if we keep them hidden inside of our hearts, the devil can use that as ammunition against our relationship with God. He can say things like he said to Eve. What if Eve had come to God? What if Eve had come to God and said, God, I really don't understand this. There's a snake, and he keeps telling me that you're holding out on us. There's the snake that keeps telling me that you don't really want my best interest. Is that true? I really kind of believe him. Do you think that God would have been able to show his love to her? Do you think that God would have been able to convince her of how much he loves her and how wrong the devil is? Yes. Instead, she kept it to herself. She started to doubt. And when the devil gets a hold of those questions and those doubts, and if we don't bring them before God, then the devil can use them to help us not trust God. So be like William Miller this week. Wrestle with God, debate with God, but also have that open mind of saying, God, okay, this frustrates me. Help me to have a clearer view of it. Help me to see it the way you want me to see it. And I think you'll really find some really exciting and very powerful spiritual mountains that you may be able to climb this week. All right, see you guys.